So hello everyone, thanks for coming to the blockchain track at Pocket Gamer Connects. We're a very rare breed of people into blockchain, so thanks for coming along. This is actually this is the third year that we've had a blockchain track at Pocket Gamer Connects. Something I'll talk a bit more about kind of later on. I guess a few introductions. So my name's John Jordan. I do a few things which I'll talk about, one of which I'm the editor of Blockchain Gamer.biz, so it's kind of why I'm here up the front. Funnily enough, I also work for a company called DappRadar. DappRadar are the main sponsor of the morning track. And you've got your kind of goodie bags there on the chairs. And people from DappRadar, wave your hands. One there, one at the back. If you want to go and talk to DappRadar, there's people around, and they're a very good company. And I'll talk a bit about that in my first talk. So let me take this off so you can see my lovely T-shirt. This is my informal DappRadar T-shirt. So we're all very Dapp happy at DappRadar, obviously. Okay, so. As happened last year at the conference, with DappRadar, we're really into dApps and data. And one of the nice things about public blockchains is everything is publicly available. So we are overwhelmed with data, which isn't always the case in the games industry. So I'm going to give an overview of 2019's data, and I will attempt to draw some trends from that. So. This is actually a very big slide deck, because I like doing slides. And I'm going to have to go quite fast, and some of the slides I'll go over kind of very quickly. But if you find me on LinkedIn, John Jordan on LinkedIn, there is the complete slide deck is there, actually slightly longer deck. And I also have a 40-minute video on YouTube, if you really care about it. So don't worry too much if I go fast. If you're really into the data, you can find it online. But I kind of wanted to at least show some graphs of what's going on, even though I don't talk about them in incredible detail. So first thing here, this is DappRadar. So DappRadar obviously covers all dApps, decentralized applications. And games is a large part of that in the blockchain space, but it obviously it's not the only thing that's going on there. So we have games, exchanges, collectibles, marketplaces, gambling. Games, gambling, and DeFi applications are the main thing going on with blockchain dApps at the moment. At DappRadar, we actually track across 10 different blockchains. So all these ones here are different blockchains that have dApps running on them. dApps, and this is kind of important in terms of what a dApp actually is. So what we're actually doing when we're tracking the activity is we're looking at the smart contract, which is just kind of automatic code that runs on a blockchain, and we're tracking the interactions of wallets with that smart contract. So that's what we're doing. And if we take a very kind of headline view on what happened in 2019, we get something like this. So this is all the games that DappRadar was tracking. So we track across 10 blockchains. The majority of those blockchains, there's not a lot going on. So there's only really there's four blockchains here that I've included, and kind of 3 of them are seen as the main blockchains for running dApps. So we have in blue at the bottom we have Ethereum, kind of the first blockchain for running dApps. And we have Tron and EOS, they're the main 3, and there's one Ontology, which is a blockchain out of China. Not an enormous amount of activity there, but there are some games running on it, so I included it for kind of for completeness, really. The main thing to note here is there is kind of growth. So we start here at the start of the year, and we're about kind of 6,000 daily active unique wallets, and we end up kind of cumulatively about 15,000. So there is growth. It's not massive growth. It's not hockey stick growth. 15,000 people playing games is not a big number, as we all know, from the mobile game space where you have DAUs of millions of people. The other thing, without getting kind of too pedantic about things, is all the data here is daily active unique wallets. So I just wanted to take a bit of time to unpick that. So obviously daily means it happened in a day, 24 hours. Active means there was interaction with the smart contract of the dApp. Unique means that for that day, that wallet's interaction with the smart contract was unique. So if I come back every day, then I'm counted as a unique every day. And we talk about wallets. So obviously in the mobile space we talk about users. In the blockchain space we can't really do that because we don't really know what's going on in terms of I could be a someone playing a game and I could play it across several different wallets, which is very hard to track, even within a certain blockchain. But if I'm playing a blockchain game on Ethereum, and I'm also playing a blockchain game on EOS, I would be counted as 2 uniques then, because we can't really track across that. So this is definitely an overestimation in terms of these numbers, because we can't track, if you're talking about unique individuals. This is the best data we've got. And so let's dig a bit more into that. So when I break down the blockchains, you'll see that I like dots, lots of coloured dots. So I've used the same colour scheme, obviously. So we have Tron and Ontology at the bottom here. You can see not a lot going on really with those. Ethereum starts the year pretty small and ends actually fairly big. And EOS kind of starts the year as the biggest blockchain in terms of games. Moves around a little bit and kind of ends the year kind of neck and neck with Ethereum in terms of total users. So that's the kind of the broad picture. What I'm going to do now is take each individual blockchain and then drill down to see what was going on and look at the kind of the dApps, the games that actually kind of drove this activity. The other thing to note is this is a normalized growth. So this is we start off at 100%, obviously at the start of the year in January. And the broad thing to note here, why I did this graph, is Ethereum. The growth of games on Ethereum is clearly the main trend during the year. So we had lots of talk at the start of the year about kind of Ethereum killers, blockchains that might replace Ethereum. Ethereum has lots of kind of issues as a proof of work, blockchain. But the hopes people had for things like Tron and EOS, which are in many ways superior technologies, wasn't reflected in the terms of anyone actually successfully launching games on these blockchains. So the growth of the year is really Ethereum. And probably for 2020, that's going to be the same. So Ethereum has lots of problems, but Ethereum is where the bulk of the developers are, where the bulk of the small number of users we have, so all on Ethereum, and I don't think that will change significantly this year. Okay, so here's Ethereum. So we see a basic growth line, lots of kind of volatility in there. 2 particular areas of volatility. So we have this big kind of spike, kind of in early summer. And then we have this kind of drop-off in September. So those are kind of 2 important kind of features, even though there was kind of large-scale growth. So quickly go through what happened in September. So in September, we had a problem with gas. So gas is the cost of a transaction on the Ethereum blockchain. So every time you do something, save something into the Ethereum blockchain, you have to pay. It's basically a kind of a mechanic of working out what can be saved, because there's only a certain amount of bandwidth, only a certain amount of data can be stored into an Ethereum block. So you have to work out what can be stored, and you do that by basically a pricing mechanic. But what happened in September? If you see the blue dotted line is the price of gas, percentage terms, and it more than doubled. So there was a particular dApp on Ethereum. It was a high-risk gambling dApp. And it kind of spanned the system and basically meant the price of all transactions went up. And what happened, the red line is the daily active unique wallets for the top 3 Ethereum games. And we can clearly see when the price of doing a transaction goes up, the number of people playing the games dropped off, fairly substantially. They lost half their audience. The good kind of news was when the price of gas went down again, then it just kind of reverted, the situation kind of reverted to what it was before, and the gaming kind of users came back on. So it wasn't a long-term issue, but it's kind of something to be aware of, as we'll see with another blockchain as well. So that was the reason why everything dropped in September. Now this horrible-looking graph, or colourful graph, as you might think, this is breaking down the products. So these are the games running on Ethereum. At the bottom, you can see there's a lot of lines going up and down, lots of colour. We'll unpick a little bit of that. But what you can basically see is there were a lot of games that were launched on Ethereum or grew on Ethereum during 2019. Very few of them, in fact, none of them apart from 2, ever had more than 1,000 daily active unique wallets. So obviously, the blockchain space very, very early still. Some interesting stuff being done, but we're not seeing anything like a mass breakout yet. The 2 games that did have an audience over 1,000 during the year, pretty interesting to see the contrast between them. So we have in blue, we have My Crypto Heroes, which we'll talk about. And then in green, we have Hypersnakes, which they have 2 very different growth trajectories. So My Crypto Heroes. This is probably, if Ethereum, the growth of games on Ethereum was the main trend for 2019, then My Crypto Heroes was the main reason for that. So we can see at the start of the year, there's very little kind of users, at best hundreds. And by the end of the year, it's kind of getting up to 4,000 daily active unique wallets. So there's definitely a growth story there. What's interesting is this kind of big increase in kind of actually in March, where it goes from basically a few hundred to over 1,000. And that was really, we'll look at the kind of what feature that was. The other thing just to note is you can see again very strongly in September you have this kind of drop off where the gas price went up and it did lose a lot of audience, but then it kind of pinged back again. So drilling back down, we have to think about with these blockchain games, what are we actually measuring in terms of, I'm picking up these daily active unique wallets, what is it that we're actually measuring? So interestingly, My Crypto Heroes is a free-to-play browser game, so you can play it on mobile or browser. And clearly it's a blockchain game, so you can sign in with a wallet, sign in with something like MetaMask. But you can also just play it. So there's a trial play option, you can play it, it's free to play, you don't have to interact with any of the blockchain elements. So anecdotally, the developer says about 2/3 of their audience actually never touch the blockchain. So this game probably has about 10,000 daily active unique players. But obviously we only track the ones that interact with the blockchain. So that's one thing which we'll kind of pick up as we go through the talk. There is this difference between bits of a game that are on the blockchain and bits of the game that aren't on the blockchain. So in terms of what we are measuring, in terms of the bits of the game that are on the blockchain, this was the feature that was brought in March and caused the first kind of jump for My Crypto Heroes. So it's called the Prime subscription. And what it is, it's a monthly subscription kind of package. And you pay either a tenth of an ETH, so $15 to $20 a month, or you can pay. They have an internal currency, nothing to do with blockchain, just a standard currency called GUM. And the point, there's a whole bunch of benefits you have for doing this. So if you want to play the game seriously, you definitely want to be on this Prime subscription. But what you do get is you get a free daily bonus. So every day you can log in and you can get 35 of this GUM currency for free, and that's the blockchain interaction. So what we're measuring here. The feature was brought in March, so we see this big jump. This is when people start using it, and then all this going up. All these users are basically logging in every day to use this Prime feature. So actually, what we here we're actually measuring. This is a good measure of actually the growth of the game, because these people are kind of hardcore players who are logging in every day to get their rewards. So. It's an interesting game, it's pretty hardcore. If you haven't played it, it's worth checking out. It is very Japanese. Most of the audience are Japanese. It's not a game that has particularly kind of wide appeal because it is very grindy, even though they've made quite a good job at making it easier. There's a better tutorial than there once was. So it's worth checking out. But this is the, I guess, the kind of poster child for a successful blockchain game. How am I doing for time? Go faster. Okay, Hypersnakes, very different. Hypersnakes out of China, and we see it has this very big peak when it launches, and then it falls away very quickly. And this is what we consider, what I consider at least, a bit more of a kind of old-fashioned kind of crypto type game. So they had a very good promotion. They had lots of discounted elements in the game. They drove a lot of kind of speculative interest, which is kind of characteristic of the Chinese kind of blockchain audience more generally. But they couldn't sustain it at all. So we're seeing less of this, but this is still kind of part of the blockchain. Kind of game ecosystem, and you can drive, high audiences, but it's very hard to keep them. Okay, another game, 0x Universe. There's a pattern here. There's growth, but it's really all over the place. This is kind of interesting. This is a much more kind of old school blockchain game. Every interaction you do is an interaction on the blockchain, so it's kind of very kind of decentralized from that point of view. That meant that when the gas price went up, they basically lost all its users. They basically went to zero because the price of an interaction was a couple of dollars for doing anything in the game, so everyone left. It doesn't have very good daily kind of retention mechanics, so it's not like everyone comes back in every day. So you have this massive volatility. So it is going up, but it's a much more kind of confused picture than My Crypto Heroes. Gods Unchained, a game that made a lot of kind of headlines in 2019. It's a kind of a Hearthstone type kind of card game. But actually, what we're measuring here is not measuring people playing the game. The game's in open beta. Anyone can download it and play it, and the game itself is centralized. What we're measuring here is the sale of the cards, the NFT cards. And they had a Genesis card pack, a Genesis card kind of promotion. It's actually quite a lot of cards, 6 million cards. But the point was once they sold out of those, then that was the Genesis card kind of pack, sold, and they weren't going to make any more. So what's interesting here is this big spike towards the end of the year in November, And that's because the cards were selling out. So you had this speculative kind of movement going on here. Also, obviously, it goes to zero. Once all the cards are sold, then no one can buy the cards. It goes to zero. And then at the end of the year and into 2020, we start to see the game's internal marketplace for card trading kind of has some users, but not as many users as were buying the cards when it was seen as a more speculative element. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. This is another way of looking at it. This is not unique wallets. This is the daily ETH volume. So this is effectively spending, and you can see the big spending was towards the end of the card sale, where you had over a couple of days of over 750 ETH being sold. So very speculatively driven. OpenSea is not a game. So OpenSea is a marketplace for NFTs on Ethereum. And if you want kind of like a pulse of the blockchain ecosystem, how well is it doing? I always look at OpenSea, because OpenSea is NFTs from effectively all games. So you can kind of start to get an idea about what's going on. So again, very small, I mean, even smaller numbers of users than we have for the game. So a couple of hundred, 300 users by the end of the year. But we can kind of see the growth. I've gone back to 2018 actually there, and we can kind of see 2019 was, had some quite significant growth towards the end of the year. And I think that gives us, even though it's very small, I think it gives us some kind of hope of what's going to happen in 2020, that there are these people. And these people are kind of speculative investors, really. They're investing in NFTs. This is daily volume. Again, we can see the biggest days of volume were actually in early 2020. So we have 2 days over 400 ETH. So it's definitely an upward trajectory there. And I got carried away with my colours here. You probably can't see it at the back, but this is just showing. This is the spending versus the daily activity, and it's just showing the blue in this corner here is obviously very small in 2018, and then we have the green, a lot more users, a lot more spending. Okay, that was all Ethereum. So EOS, go a bit quicker. So EOS started the year as the biggest blockchain, and it grew, but this big mess towards the end of the year. So we had an issue with EOS similar to the gas price on Ethereum, and there was lots of congestion on EOS because there was an airdrop for the IDOS token, and that basically congested the platform. And if you wanted to get your transaction on the EOS blockchain, you had to stake more EOS, and people didn't do that. So we had quite a strong drop-off of games. This is the main games on EOS. Not as many as on Ethereum. And there's kind of three that kind of really matter. So there's, in yellow, we have EOS Knights. And then in blue, we have EOS Dynasty, which is kind of a copycat. And then in red, we have Prospectors. So EOS Dynasty and Prospectors did OK. They kind of launched in the year and kept going, 2,000 daily active unique wallets. The big story for EOS, for gaming at least, was EOS Knights. So it started off really successfully. Over 7,000 daily active unique wallets at one point. And then we have this quite steady but quite prolonged decline. It's not quite clear why that happened. I think on EOS, you always get a lot of bots. So I think there was this high figure was created by bots. I think the developer got more active at kind of clearing out bots. The other thing is an idle game, a mobile idle game. So after a certain period of time, not a lot happens new in it. So I think there's a kind of a natural kind of churning of audience. The other thing that happened was towards the end of the year, we had this congestion, and EOS Knights basically kind of lost most of its audience and became a bit of a legacy product. The other thing is the developer actually launched a new game called Knight Story on Ethereum, which is basically EOS Knights kind of version 2. So I think they kind of focused on another product, not this. Tron, not really much to say about Tron. So Tron is very much focused on gambling, and even the games on Tron are quite gambling oriented. There is one game, though, that's worth mentioning on Tron. So Blockchain Cuties, we'll have a talk from Vlad from Blockchain Cuties later on. Kind of interesting game, been around for a long time, over a year now. Runs on 4 different blockchains. The only game, I think, still that runs on 4 different blockchains. So it runs on Ethereum, it's its main blockchain, that's in blue, its main audience, but has actually built its Tron audience during 2019. It is on EOS, but no one plays it on EOS. A bit of ontology. The interesting thing here is towards the end of the year, we have this kind of big rise in the start of December where they brought in a new feature, sorry. And Vlad will probably talk more about that. But it was kind of interesting that did adding a new feature to the game, added more gameplay and did increase the audience. So very quickly through trends. So what's going to happen? So we have a big thing about blockchain games or games using the blockchain. So this is a bit of a philosophical thing. Blockchain games, for me, are games that everything runs on the blockchain. So that's a kind of a crypto hardcore sort of approach. It's really interesting, but very hard to onboard people. All the activity we're seeing is games using the blockchain, so games with mainly centralized game logic and using blockchain for item ownership. I think the trend we'll see in 2020 is more games using blockchain rather than blockchain games. This is Axie Infinity. Pretty small game, definitely worth checking out. Pretty small community, I should say, but very interesting how they're building out their game. So they've brought in a new feature as well, and it's actually a token, ERC20 token called Small Love Potions. And you need the Small Love Potions to breed, so this is a breeding screen, but you earn them through battling. So they have this nice mechanic where now you play the game, you earn these Small Love Potions, you can use them in the game, or because it's an ERC20 token, you can stick them on Uniswap, a decentralized exchange, and sell them. So they have this, it's not a term I particularly like, I think we'll discuss it later in the day, play to earn, but effectively you can do that. You can take the things you earn in the game and sell them. And there are other games now with ERC20 tokens. We've seen that as a trend. Blockchain Cuties has a token. The Sandbox is going to have its own token. Another big thing is land. So land is an NFT, ERC721 token. So permanence in these games is pretty important, both for kind of monetization and for kind of building kind of big meta game features. So this is again from Axie Infinity. Again, Blockchain Cuties has land. Most of these games are trying to build kind of permanent features in there. And some big games coming out in 2020. So we're going to have speakers from the Sandbox today. We're going to have speakers from Neon District, Crypto Space Commander. We're going to have speakers from F1 Delta Time, Blanco's Block Party. These are all pretty high-profile, high-funded games using the blockchain in some interesting ways. So thanks. There's my email address. There's me on Twitter. I've gone too long, so no time for questions. But thank you very much.